Many people forgot about the trip of an unknown young man who was sent on a mission that didn't seem important to anyone else for hundreds of years. His name isn't often linked to religious heroes, but his steps went through deserts of doubt, valleys of pain, and mountains of holy quiet. Tobias didn't go on an easy trip. He went on a path that was hidden in the shadows and where every detail had a reason that would last forever. How could a young man with no training be sent to fight psychic forces that can't be seen? Also, why would God give such a complicated plan to a normal person? It is clear what the answer is. Heaven doesn't pick the ready, he gets the ready. Tobias was chosen for something much bigger than himself, even though he didn't know it. It all started in Nineveh, a city in a foreign country where Jewish people who had been sent away tried to keep their roots alive. There, in the stifling alleyways and streets full of idols, lived a family that had been happy before, but was now in terrible pain. The father, Tobit, was known for being honest. He would not give up his faith, even when a harsh kingdom put pressure on him to do so. His fathers had taught him customs that he carried on while living with the Assyrians. He also helped the poor, the forgotten dead, and the looked down upon living. This promise, on the other hand, would cost him a lot. Tobit put his own life at risk by hiding the bodies of his fellow citizens who had been left in the streets, even though the king told him not to. It was both a kind act and a protest against the dominating society. Tobit was tired when he got home from another secret funeral on one of those quiet nights. He went outside to get some fresh air and calm down. In that moment of rest, something strange happened. Warm bird droppings fell from the sky and hit him in the eyes. In just a few days, he lost the vision that helped him find the poor, comfort the hurt, and take care of his own. Going blind was like getting a harsh punishment. Once, Tobit had brought light into the lives of many. Now, he was lost in the dark. The shame in public was unbearable, and the pain at home got worse. His wife used to be patient, but now she was angry all the time. Friends and neighbors started to talk quietly, and Tobias, his only son, was right in the middle of it all. He saw the star of his youth turn into the weak, rejected blind man. As the days went by, the situation got worse and worse. The family's earnings were falling apart, resources were running out, and the words of faith that used to make everyone happy were getting harder to find. During a sad talk, Tobit thought back to a stash of silver he had left in better times in a faraway city in Media called Rags. But to get it back, he would need someone strong and reliable. Tobias had never been in public by himself. As a child, he still knew more about following orders than being led. But because his father was in a hurry and trusted him, he took on the task. What looked like a simple trip to get some money back turned out to be the start of a spiritual tale. Tobias didn't know it, but he was getting ready to cross dangerous areas, face hidden threats, and find secrets that would change the way he saw the world and himself. The young man didn't know one thing, though. He wouldn't be alone. Tobias was about to leave, but his mother stopped him because she was afraid for his safety. She was more afraid of losing him than she was of getting the money back. But Tobit, who was blind, could see farther than most people. Even though no one could see it, he knew that task had a reason for being done. He prayed to God with a sad heart and quiet faith, asking him to send Tobias a good friend to go with him. That's when Azariah showed up. The man was quiet and calm, and he offered to help as a guide for the trip. No one knew for sure where he came from, but his calmness, knowledge, and determination made people feel safe. No one, not even Tobias, thought that this man was really an angel sent by God. He was Raphael, dressed as a normal person to do a job in heaven. He said goodbye to his parents and started the trip, but his heart wasn't sure what to do. He came with directions, names, some coins, and a promise to come back. But the most important thing he brought was trust. His family and the whole world would be touched by every step he took through the sand and rocks. People thought it was just a simple trip to Rags, but it turned out to be a plan made by the Most High. It was dangerous, and the days were long when you were on the road. People who were after Tobias, wild animals, and routes that no one knew about lived in the fields and mountains that he crossed. But Raphael kept all the details secret. Soon, too, new players would join the story. A young woman who felt insulted and about to give up waited in another city for a promise to be kept that would change her life forever. Heaven had already planned for them to meet. The psychic world was also moving as Tobias moved forward. Because even the angels move when God chooses to do something. If you're already moved by this story, I'd like to offer a special request to you before we go on. Tell someone you care about this movie and like it. They might need a word of faith and hope. Also, please subscribe to our channel so that we can keep going through these important faith stories with you. Also, please leave a super thanks if you want to help this work. We can keep telling more Bible stories and spreading this message of faith and hope thanks to your gift. Thank you so much for your help. We'll keep going on our journey today. Tobit's blindness hurt more than just his eyes. It also destroyed the unseen bonds that held his family together. His home, which used to be strong on faith and respect, was filled with dark days. Not because there wasn't any light, but because sadness spread like fog. The man who used to be able to lead with force needed to be led now. And in this strange, empty space, the figure of Tobias began to take on new meaning. He was polite, respectful, and learned about the ways of his ancestors. Before that, though, he had never chosen for himself. For him, the real world was still a long way off. It was quiet when the change took place. He knew that time and money were running out, so his father called him with a voice that was both tired and full of hope. He told him about some money that had been given to a faraway friend, a silver sum that could save the family. It was in a different place, far away, but still easy to get to. Tobias should get it too. There were no maps or promises of safety with the request. There was only a name, a place to go, and the faith of a father who could not see but could still see with his mind. Tobias agreed, but as he got his things together, the truth started to hit him hard. Would he be by himself? What if he got lost? What would he do when he didn't know what the danger was? Question began to come up in the quiet of not knowing what would happen. And help was sent at that very moment when they were weak. A man showed up without any fuss, quiet and sure of themselves. His name was Azariah. He said he could be a help. Tobias had no idea where he was coming from, but just being around him made him feel better. He didn't know it, but he said yes to being with an angel. He left home the next morning. To keep from getting weak, he didn't look back. As she cried, his mother tried to understand that her son was going not only because he had to, but also because he didn't know what. When Tobit was blind and praying, he only asked God to send a good servant to keep Tobias safe. Heaven already knew the answer before it was asked. It was tough to start. It was too hot to stand. It wasn't safe to walk on. Tobias tried to hide how uncomfortable he felt, but Azariah saw everything and didn't judge. The mystery friend helped him move forward with simple words and sure advice. Tobias quickly learned that he wasn't just a helper. His words were wise, his answers were strong, and he gave off a calm that seemed to come from somewhere else. They soon got to the edge of a big river. The water looked calm, but it had dangerous things in it. This is where Azariah advised they stop. Tobias tried to fish, but something went wrong. A big fish came out of the water and tried to bite him. Although frightened, he was able to catch it with the guide's help. Then Azariah told him to take out the heart, liver, and bile from the animal. He said everything would come in handy later. Tobias, who was confused, did what he was told. At the time, it didn't make sense, but time would show what it was all about. They kept going on their way. It got harder to walk on the paths, and people started to get tired. He still thought that something inside him was shifting. Even though he still had fears, his faith was growing. Then Azariah told him about a girl named Sara who lived in Ecbatana and was related to his family in a vague way. She was an honest woman, but she had a sad past. All of her lovers died before the wedding, apparently killed by an unseen force. Azariah told Tobias straight out that God wanted them to marry. Tobias didn't say anything. The story sounds really scary. 7 men had already tried, but all of them died. Why would he be different? Azariah told him in a cool voice that this time things would be different. He told her that the pieces of the fish that Tobias had saved would be used to get rid of the evil spirit that was scaring her. It was tough to believe. Tobias remembered, though, that his dad had prayed. He thought about how brave he had been when everything went wrong. He chose to trust them. There were some things he didn't fully understand, but he knew it wasn't by chance. Tobias's heart was beating fast as they got closer to Ecbatana, not only because he met the young woman, but also because he finally got it. This job was about a lot more than just getting silver. He had been called to make things right. His story was linked to that woman's. Every step taught him how to be obedient. On the distance, the mountains showed up. It wasn't far to the city. It also meant that a new stage was coming up. Tobias wasn't the same young man who had no idea where he was going when he left home. He walked with hope now, following someone who knew the way and the sky. That still morning, the first rays of sunlight lit up the roofs of Nineveh, making it look like the sky was seeing the start of something bigger. As he stood at the door, Tobias took a big breath. He had a small bag on his back. Without being able to see it, the weight of his responsibility was clear to him. This trip wasn't just to send a message, it was the start of a calling he didn't fully understand yet. Azariah was waiting for him there. In human eyes, he was just a friend, a quiet young guy with a firm grip and a soft voice, but there was something strange about him. She didn't dare ask him where he was from, and he didn't know why he felt so calm by his side. He only knew that being around him made people feel safe. It was like God sent an older brother who could walk through any dark valley without any trouble. Tobit settled down right away when he heard Azariah's words. Even though he couldn't see him, his vision didn't work, but his spirit did. There was something harsh, kind, and calm in that voice. Tobit felt safe in a way he hadn't felt in a long time when Tobias introduced his friend to his father. He reached out and tightly held his son's hands before letting him go. Even though his words were short, they will always be remembered. Son, always be honest when you walk. Sow kindness wherever there is a chance. Don't turn down hungry people who ask for food. Also, respect the name that leads you, even when things around you don't make sense, because people who fear God never walk alone. Each piece of advice was etched in Tobias's heart as he listened in silence. That goodbye wasn't just words, they were armor for the fights that were to come. He bowed and kissed his parents' hands. Then, with still shaky steps, he walked away with his soul free. The road quickly showed its problems. The roads were dry, the wind hurt his face, and the ground was rough. Tobias worked hard to stay positive, but it was clear that he could not have done it by himself. Azariah knew not only the paths, but also the sounds of fear. He knew when to be quiet and when to talk. He was a guide and guardian, but he never got in the way. He was relaxing on the bank of a river one afternoon when all of a sudden a huge fish jumped out of the water and lunged at him. It scared him so much that he almost dropped everything and ran. But Azariah's voice was clear. Don't be scared. Take it. Tobias did what came naturally and was able to calm the animal down. Soon after that, Azariah gave him some strange directions. He told him to carefully take out the fish's heart, liver, and stomach. He said that each part would do something different, like heal, free, or guard. Tobias didn't know what was going on, but he trusted, just like he had trusted every step of the way since the trip began. That same night, as the stars watched in silence, Azariah told him about Sara, who was the daughter of a distant cousin named Rafael. Tobias had heard about the family, but he didn't know anything about the girl. He couldn't believe what Azariah told him. 7 guys had tried to marry her. 7 had already died before they could take their vows. They were being possessed by a bad spirit. Now Sara lived in shame, being blamed, being afraid, and being alone because of pain that wasn't hers. There was silence for a short time. Tobias was shocked and didn't know what to do, but Azariah kept going quietly. "This woman is God's gift to you, and you will be the one who changes her fate. Don't be afraid of the ghost. Your faith will be your strength, and what you kept from the fish will be your tool." The young man thought about it. Get married? He had not even thought about it. And with someone who caused such pain? But something inside him told him this wasn't crazy. It was a plan. It could have been Tobit's prayers or Azariah's steady presence. Tomas thought about the idea for a few days. Even though he was still scared, it wasn't stopping him. He was starting to understand that trust is not being afraid, but choosing to keep going even though you are scared. Tobias's heart also changed when he saw the mountains on the distance, which meant they were getting closer to Ecbatana. Spending time with Azariah was a school in and of itself. To be brave, believe, and most of all, obey were things he learned, but not blind devotion, the kind that comes from knowing for sure that God is in the details, even if you don't understand them all. They could already make out the shape of the walls from far away. This is the place where a woman cried and waited for a miracle. The city where Tobias would learn that his job was more important than just bringing silver coins. That's where heaven and earth would meet again, and the impossible would become real. And he didn't know it, but each step led him to the heart of a plan that was bigger than him. Because sometimes God doesn't just answer prayers, he even thinks about them before they happen. The road dirt stuck to his shoes to remind him of each step he took. The town spoke strange languages, and there were a lot of hills. Tobias looked at Azariah's calm movements for solutions. Every day, the road changed him. He wasn't the same boy who'd been sad when he left Nineveh. He began to feel that there was a reason for everything, even though it was quiet. The road was still bad. The heat was awful. He was getting tired, and he was worried about what would happen. In his soul, Tobias kept his prayers a secret. Not ease, but safety was all he asked for. He had no idea that the first real test was about to come up out of the ground. The sun was just starting to go down when they got to the Tigris River. There was a moment when the calm water and golden light made the scene look like it was a place to rest. Tobias knelt down at the edge of the bank to wash his feet, hoping that the cool water would help him feel better. However, what looked like a moment of calm quickly changed into chaos. Without notice, a big thing came to the surface. A huge, dangerous fish came out of the water and lunged violently at Tobias. For a moment, the shock stopped him from moving. He screamed for help and fell backwards as he tried to get away. He was sure that someone would drag him away. The fight happened quickly, brutally, and naturally. His mind was fuzzy, and his heart was beating fast. "Don't run away!" Azariah's strong voice rang through the sadness like thunder. "Take it! Hold it by the gills!" No thought went into Tobias's action. He fought, struggled, and strained his arms until, after a lot of work, he was able to control the thing. He passed out on the shore, his eyes watering, his body shaking, and his mind racing. He had no idea what had happened. When Azariah got close, he said, "Now open the fish." In his usual cool voice, "Take out the blood, liver, and heart. Keep them. You can throw away the rest." Tomas, who was still on his knees, looked at him with shock. He asked out of breath, "Why?" Azariah answered, "The heart and liver have the power to free, and the bile makes blind eyes see again. You don't get it yet, but everything has its time. You will soon know." The words sounded strange. Tobias didn't get how something so strange could be useful, but he knew that you don't have to understand everything to follow it. It was hard for him to understand why he had to do what he was told, but he did it anyway. It took him a long time to clean the organs, wrap them in clean cloth, and put them away, as if they were holy objects. As time went on and they continued their trip, They became more and more silent. Tobias thought more about what he had been through and tried to figure out what it all meant. It was like the problems weren't obstacles, but pieces of a puzzle that heaven had written for him to use faith to figure out. At that moment, Azariah said something that Tobias would never forget. What looks like an attack is sometimes a provision. Wars don't always destroy, they show you what you need to carry for the next phase. He didn't answer Tobias. He kept that phrase secret, like a secret. He had a different feeling. Even though there were still questions, there was a strange peace that went along with them. They were sure that there was a bigger plan going on in the background. Now, I'd like to talk to you who are still reading this story. Have you ever thought about how many times the things that scared you were really tools of God? How many times was pain not punishment but a way to get ready? Say right now, I trust the path that God has laid out for me. If your heart trusts, even when it doesn't understand, your faith can show someone else the way. When Tobias got back to the path, he walked with more awareness. He had some strange things in his bag, but he had something new in his heart, an open heart. The faith that he had only seen in his father before started to show up in him too. He kept going, even though he couldn't see the end of the road. The mountains in front of them already marked the start of a new stage. They were going to get to Ecbatana soon. There, he didn't know it, the path of a troubled woman would cross his. What looked like a trip to find metal would change the lives of two people. The fish, which had been a sign of danger before, was now a key. The link between the unseen and the impossible would be those strange parts that are so hard to understand. Even though it looked like a problem, the fight turned out to be the start of a surprise. Tobias didn't know what the thing he was carrying meant yet. But little by little, he learned that people who trust without seeing walk toward what they can't see with their soul's eyes open. It looked like there was no end to the road to Ecbatana, but Tobias knew that the real trip was still to come. He was going to find more than just the city. There was a story that was connected to his own since before he was born. Azariah always walked ahead and took slow, steady steps, as if he knew every turn in the road. When they finally saw the shape of the old city, there was a different kind of quiet. It seemed like the air itself was full of memories that people in the city would rather forget. On one of the small streets, there was a young woman whose name was mentioned with fear, Sara. She was beautiful to look at, but she was in pain, and her face didn't show the weight of her soul. 7 men had asked her to marry them. 7 boyfriends had died, not from sickness or war either. All of them fell apart before they could even finish their marriage. What was the reason? Asmodeus, the devil, lived around her and was mean and jealous. He was determined to stop any man from loving her. The pain Sara was in was felt by many people. She was humiliated by something she didn't do and alone because of a fear she couldn't control. She was always sad. She cried out in silence and begged God to save her and sometimes even to end it. She only dreamed of peace now, not love. When they got close to the city, Raphael, who was still called Azariah, stopped. He looked at Tobias with a holy determination, as if he were carrying a divine order. He made it clear that this woman was meant to be with him. Yes, she is related to you, but that's not all. You've been promised her from the start. God brought you together before you knew what love was. But Tobias didn't say anything. The idea didn't make sense. How could he, a young tourist with little experience, take someone whose past was so sad? Was this what God wanted? Raphael then talked about something that no one knew how to say out loud. He told him about the bad spirit that killed her 7 men. He told her that she wasn't cursed but hurt, and that she wasn't guilty, just locked up. Also, that Tobias would be the one to set her free. The young man got a chill. He asked with a shaky voice, "What about me? Am I going to die too?" Raphael answered with a peace that only angels have. "No. Pay attention. When you go into the wedding room with her, bring the fish's heart and liver with you. Put them on top of the incense sticks. The smell will get stronger and the ghost will run away. I'll handle the rest." The boy Tobias held his breath. In his heart, fear and trust were fighting for room. But there was something about Raphael that made him seem authoritative. It was hard to explain, but it was there. He thought back to what his father had said, the nights he had prayed alone, and the advice he had been given at his funeral. It's possible that everything was really linked. When they went to Sara's dad Raguel's house, they were made to feel welcome. But the old man's face changed when it was said that they were going to get married. Edna, his wife, tried to hide how scared she was. Raguel felt sorry for Tobias as he looked at him. He told him, "You are a good young man, but you should know this. I can't keep what happened to the others from you." On their wedding night, none of them came back living. Tobias didn't give up. He held his tongue and said, "I know the risks, but I trust in God." Rather than going against fate, he said he would marry Sara because it was the will of the Most High. Because of how brave he was, his family agreed. There was a lot of stress the night of the wedding. Edna got her daughter ready with hands that were shaking. Sara cried, but not like before. This time, her tears were full of hope. Tobias held the rags that he had used to store the heart and stomach of the fish downstairs. Raphael kept a close eye on him. When Tobias walked into the bedroom, he did what he had been told. When he put the organs on the coals, the smell spread like incense on fire. Something violent moved from somewhere that couldn't be seen. The devil, who felt kicked out, ran away in a rage, getting out of his prison over that house. Raphael, who could not be seen by humans, chased him all the way to the end of Egypt and tied him up. On earth there is silence, but in heaven the win was already certain. Before going to bed, Sara and Tobias prayed together. She slept well for the first time in years. And that's when Tobias finally understood what it meant to follow without understanding. The next morning, Raguel came into the room quickly and with a sad heart. He had already dug a grave because he was afraid that tragedy would happen again. But when he opened the door, he saw the two praying and still alive. He broke down in tears and blessed the God of Israel. The miracle took place. The pain had stopped coming back. Fear had been beaten by love. For the whole trip, Tobias had no idea who was really with him. Azariah, as he called himself, didn't show off his power or expect respect. However, there was something unusual about his presence. A steady calm, a knowledge that didn't come from books, and a peace that spoke louder than any words. Tobias believed in him. He knew in his heart what his eyes couldn't see, not because he was dumb. If this man has shown me the way and taught me to trust in God like my father did, then I will trust, even if my mind doesn't fully understand yet, he thought. The people who lived with Sara's father, Raguel, made them feel welcome when they got there. The older person gave them food and a place to stay and listened carefully. But when he found out that Tobias had come to ask for his daughter's hand, he slouched a little. His smile got weaker. It wasn't bad faith, it was fear. Fear that something terrible will happen again. Raguel finally spoke, but his voice was broken. "My son, if it's true that you want her to be your wife, I will not say no. But I need you to know that everyone who loved her died. 7 men, 7 graves, and no one else woke up with her." Tobias took a big breath. His heart hurt, but he didn't let up on his feet. When he looked into Sara's eyes, he saw more than just beauty. Pain, hope, and a quiet faith that held on to the thread of God's promise were all he saw. "Yes," he said, "because they believe it, not because they are brave." That night, they got the wedding room ready. The air felt like it was stuck between 2 worlds. One was heavy with memories, and the other was eager for a fresh start. It wasn't just a wedding. Under the guise of a ritual, it was a silent fight. I remember everything Azariah said, so Tobias took the fish's heart and stomach. He put them on the hot coals. The smell rose like smoke that had a purpose. The next instant, something broke the silence of what couldn't be seen. A hushed cry. There is a fierce trend in the spirit world. Sara had been tortured by a bad spirit for years, and now it was out in full force. But Raphael, the angel who went by a human name, was already there. He fought the monster with the power of heaven. His power was locked up, and he was dragged to Egypt where he was locked up. He put him in chains there, ending his power over that woman's life. At Raguel's house, the stress stayed the same. Because he was so scared, the father dug a grave all night, sure that Tobias would be another name on Sara's sad list. The mother prayed quietly because she couldn't sleep, because she was afraid she would wake up to hear her daughter crying. But what they heard was not the same. A laugh. Real, soft laughs. That room that had been used for grief heard the sound of life for the first time in years. There was a Tobias. Sara was happy. Not a tragedy, not a death, just thanks and comfort. When Raguel saw that something miraculous had happened, he got down on his knees. His hands, which were dirty from the dirt, were now joined in praise. No longer would he bury his son-in-law. Instead, he would be happy about a new story. His wife, Edna, ran to hug her daughter, and that hug helped her feel better. Years of shame were swapped for respect. The curse was taken away. What God had been putting together for all time was now finished in front of people. There was a lot of fun the next few days, but it wasn't a normal party. There was spiritual weight in every action, every dish served, and every smile shared. That house, which had been scary before, was now filled with hope. Tobias, who was once just a young man who did what he was told, was now seen as someone who had courage to face the unknown. Sara had also changed. Her beauty was once hidden by pain, but now it shone with freedom. She wasn't walking around hunched over because of charges anymore. She walked slowly, like she had just been freed from an old jail. Raguel offered gifts, food and prayers at the goodbye, but he also thanked God, because he knew that what had happened there was not the work of people, but of heaven. Tobias got ready to go back. He would come back with his wife, so he wouldn't be alone anymore. He was going to come back with proof. He would come back knowing for sure that those who follow, even if they don't get promises, are never left alone. The wonder that started with a mean fish finished with a life being brought back to full health. Someone did something strange on the river that turned out to be the key to freedom. Now everything made sense. Every word, every step, and every pause. And maybe that's the most important lesson. Heaven does things that we can't see when someone decides to walk with God, even though they don't understand. Because having faith doesn't mean not being afraid. Faith is choosing to keep going, even though you are shaking. Tobias and Sara's story wasn't just about getting married, it was also about freedom. There was more to it than love. There was a reason for it all. Most of all, it was about trust, even when you can't see, even if you don't understand, even when it looked like everything was going wrong. In Ecbatana, the parties had gone on for days. The happiness was too much to hold in. That house, which used to be sad, was now filled with joy, laughter, and thanksgiving. As soon as the party noise died down, Raphael went up to Tobias with a new plan. He told her, "Stay here with your wife. I'll get Gabriel the money your dad left him." It wasn't just an offer. It was a sign of trust. Tobias didn't think twice. The trip had already changed him. He put all of his faith in the man who had led him through trials, risks, and wonders. Raphael went off by himself, but Tobias stayed to rest and take care of Sara. A few days later, Raphael came back with the money he had promised and was already planning the trip back. The trip back, on the other hand, was very different from the trip there. The young man who followed the road was no longer scared. When Tobias walked, he looked strong, like he had fought the unseen and won. He was a good husband, a silent fighter, and a live example of how reliable God is. In Nineveh, far away, Tobit and Anna were keeping track of the days while they were anxious. And as the seasons changed, their longing got stronger. She would go to the door every morning. She looked all over the road for a shape that never showed up. The prayers she said were already heard by the skies, until one dirty afternoon, the sky changed. Anna saw people coming toward her, a lot of money. Her heart was beating fast. She yelled and ran, making it sound like her feet were breaking time. She wasn't even sure what was making her hands shake before tears started to fall. After that, he was there, Tomasz, still alive, peaceful. He had a beautiful young woman with steady, soft eyes with her, Sara. Anna hugged them like she had found a lost piece of her heart. She laughed, she cried, she got down on the ground and thanked God, but her words got carried away by the wind. But there was still something that wasn't fixed. Tobit was inside the house and could hear the noise, but not see what was going on. Even though his heart was happy, the darkness still covered his eyes. His sun was there, but it wasn't bright. It was like the sun behind the clouds. That's when Tobias remembered. He thought back to that strange time by the Tigris River. The fish, what a battle! The voice of Azariah telling him to keep the heart, liver, and gall. Most of all, he remembered the promise, the gall will heal blindness. How many days did he stay careful with that bottle? How many times had he doubted that it would be useful? Everything made sense right then, in front of his dad. God had already made the cure before it was needed. Tobias walked up with quiet trust. He had the small jar he had kept with him the whole trip in his hands. Raphael stayed close by and watched in silence, like someone who sees something holy come true. Tobias held his dad's face gently. Even though his hands were shaking, his heart was still. He slowly poured the bile on the eyes that were blind. Tobit shook his head. He had a burning feeling and a strong sting. When he closed his eyes, something fell like a shell breaking. He opened his eyes slowly. He opened his eyes. A soft light came into his dark world. He saw it. Over time, shapes and faces started to show up, and there was his son in front of him. That was the same son he had sent away with prayers. The same son who had doubts when he left and now came back with honor. Bit gave a smile. He cried. He put out his arms and gave him a tight hug. "My son, I see you. Finally, I see you." The house was full of happiness. Anna ran to see what was happening. The people next door heard and came to look. The good old blind man Tobit could now see again, and everyone was interested in how. Tobias simply replied, "God did it." Days after that, there was even more partying, but not like the ones before. It was an event for the heart. A big thank you to the trustworthy God who leads, heals, and rebuilds. Now that Tobit was better, he spoke out loud, "Blessed be the Lord who did not leave us, who heard our prayers, and who sent his angel to walk with us." That was the only time Raphael showed himself. He stood there with awe and said, "I am not Azariah. You can always find me in front of God's throne. My name is Raphael. I was sent to help people and keep them safe. Everything you've seen and done was set up by the Most High. There was no sound, a peace that can only come from heaven." He got down on his knees. Tobias and Sara copied what he did. All of them bowed down to the one that looked like a man but was really one of God's servants. With a smile, Raphael got up and left. There was more than just a memory left. It made trust stronger. She knew that every step she took had been worth it. Each problem was a chance to practice. Every tear is like a fountain of wonders, and Tobias finally got it. The best way to reach your goals is to obey without expecting anything in return. For when you walk with God, even the most common people can be angels, and even the worst times can be the start of healing. Tobit didn't want to give up his son. We made up for lost time by giving each other tight hugs. After that, he held Sara in his arms like she was a long-lost daughter. As they praised God, Anna joined them, her eyes still wet with tears. Together, the four of them sang a song that shook the whole house, a prayer of thanks, of renewed hope, and of faith that paid off. It used to be quiet and sad in Tobit's house, but now it was full of happiness. Things that looked like they were taken away were given back. He had lost his sight for no clear reason, but it had been returned. Many people thought his son was dead, but he came back. Freed from an unseen jail, he brought his good and kind wife with him. As more light came into the house, the father and son looked at Azariah, the quiet young man who had been with them from the start, the one who had led, protected, taught, and stayed true through all the hard times. He said with a new sparkle in his eye, "We must reward him. We could never find the words to thank him for what he did for us." Tobias agreed right away. There was a strong sense of recognition at that very moment. Without him, the task would not have been possible. Everything, the faith, the healing and the freedom, went through this man, whose name was still a secret. They carefully figured out a large share of the treasure that had been found. They should have done something. Tobias walked up and graciously offered the coins as a thank you, but Azariah smiled before he could speak. His smile wasn't like most. It was quiet in a way that didn't belong in this world. In a soft but firm voice, he said, "Bless the Lord of heaven. Honor his name in front of all living things. Don't thank me. Thank the one who did something for you that no one else could." It was hard for Tobit and Tobias to understand each other. Though they were still grateful, there was a change in the air around them. The young man went on before they could say anything. "I'm not what you think I am. I'm not just a guy. My name is Raphael, and I'm one of the 7 angels that stand in front of God's throne." The room was very quiet, like a cloud. "I was sent to heal you, show you the way, and answer your prayers. The wonders were not done by me, but by the Lord. He could hear your tears. He knew that your prayers were sincere. He thought about how loyal you were. Then he did something. It was so moving that both the Father and the Son fell to their knees when they heard these words. They were aware, so their bodies were shaking, not out of fear. They were walking with an angel. A message from heaven had kept them safe. They had no idea. With heavenly patience, Raphael looked at them with love. "Don't be scared. I was sent to help you. All the gold in the world is not worth as much as prayer, fasting, and doing the right thing. Kindness and generosity keep people from dying, but people who walk in sin are on their way to endless hell." The words weren't a warning. They were a discovery, a lesson that the most valuable thing anyone can have is to live in truth before God. Bit was still trying to figure out what was going on. The trip of his son, his healing, the marriage and Sarah's release were all parts of a much bigger plan. Everything was taken care of by God. Before they even asked, he had everything ready, and he sent Raphael perfectly. With one last loving look, the angel told the boy, "Always remember to bless the Lord. Tell people in the future what he did. Don't hide the wonders. People should honor his name, because he is good and has a lot of kindness." Raphael rose with a soft glow after that. There was no big deal. There was no noise, just a calm light. He then went away, leaving behind the sure knowledge that heaven had reached earth. Tobit cried quietly while still on his knees. Tobias, who was with him, felt the weight of the glory of having walked with a god. They knew they would never be the same again, and their eyes were filled with tears. A new life was starting in that house. The neighbors were amazed and awed as they listened to the stories. People began passing down the story of the young man who went on a mission and came back with a wife, a miracle, and a visit from an angel. It was a long time before Tobit died, always being fair and kind. The family that Tobias and Sara built was strong and based on religion. At every meal and party, they thought about the day God did more than they asked for. He did what they thought was impossible, because if you follow God with a good heart, he sends angels to help you. Don't forget to tell others about his wonders. The angel Raphael left with these words. Then, in front of their shocked eyes, he rose slowly from the ground, as if he were made of air and light. As he rose, a bright glow wrapped around him, and then he was gone in an instant, as if heaven itself had pulled him back home. No one spoke at that time. No one was brave. What might they say? It wouldn't be enough at all. There were parts of songs, words, and old poems that couldn't explain what they had seen. There was only one answer that made sense. Worship. Thank you without words. Faith without asking for it. There was silence that turned into praise. From time to time, angels really do walk with us. We're not aware of it. Sometimes miracles happen right in front of our eyes, like when someone gives us advice, a door opens, or we take a route that makes no sense. We only understand later. But sometimes we are asked to be that person who walks next to someone else. Because when God does something, it's not always magical. He also uses the everyday, the usual, and the strange. Tobias' story doesn't end with the miracle that could be seen, with his marriage to Sara, or with his successful return home. The real story keeps going on the quiet path of trust, a faith that doesn't depend on being sure, but on trust. A faith that grows even though people don't fully understand why it's happening. Many people today leave their homes because they are afraid, not sure, not being sure of what was waiting for him, without any promises. He didn't know how dangerous it was. He didn't know how far it was. He had no idea that he would be facing a bad spirit. He had no idea that an angel was with him. Still, he went. He went because he had faith. It was because his dad taught him to believe in others, because he knew that doing what you say is more important than answering. It was because he knew in his heart that God was there, even though he couldn't see. He made every choice on that trip based on faith, not on what made sense. There was no map. There were no clues. There were only strange directions, like keeping fish parts safe. A mystery guide only gave them promises of safety, only a marriage proposal from a fake angel, only an unsure future being made by hands that can't be seen. Still, Tobias kept going. He walked forward with calm feet, even though his heart was shaking. During this time, he taught us a timeless truth. To do God's will, we don't have to understand everything. What seems silly today might be very important tomorrow. What tests you now can be what keeps you going later. What happened to Tobias showed us how God deals with all of us. He doesn't show the whole way. He only shows what to do next. And that step, no matter how small it seems, can lead to a miracle. Maybe you're going through something similar right now. It's possible that you were called to a place where the answers are not yet there. Maybe the road you're on doesn't have any clear signs. Maybe you're having problems that no one else sees. You might even be following God without knowing why or seeing effects right away. I want to remind you of something easy but important right now. You are not alone. God won't leave you in the middle of the road. He doesn't send supplies with you when He calls you into the unknown. He doesn't let pain happen without also making plans for repair. He doesn't ask you to take faith-filled steps without making sure you have a path to follow. Invisible beings have been sent to guide you. Some doors have been unlocked but not opened yet. Some fights will never happen because they have already been won in heaven. He already hears your prayers. His comfort already comes to you as you cry. He is already getting stronger while you pause. And if you keep going like Tobias did, even though you don't understand, you will get where you're going. Every danger, every tear, every quiet, every wait, and everything else will make sense when you look back. His life wasn't easy. It was marked by the fact that God was always with him through good times and bad. He did not have an easy trip, but he was safe on it. He had promises from God, but no promises from people. That was enough. No story ends in chaos for God. People who look back and only see bad things should remember this. Every valley has an end with him. Every night ends with dawn. And there is a sound for every cry. That's clear from Tobias. He starts his story in pain and ends it with a vision. It starts with fear and ends with a memory. It starts with quiet submission and ends with miracles being announced. It also teaches us that what God does for us is not the miracle. What He does for us is the miracle. Because the Tobias who came back was different from the one who had left. He was a man, married, a fighter of the heart, a kid who saw something impossible happen. And most importantly, a worker who learned to believe without needing to be told why. We should remember his story and walk even when it's dark, to follow even if you don't understand, to believe even though you can't see. Since God is involved, even the everyday becomes timeless, and things you can't see seem more real than things you can touch. Tobias walked with Raphael without realizing that Raphael was an angel. Similarly, many people today are led by spiritual beings who don't show themselves right away. Heaven doesn't always make a big deal out of itself. Sometimes it hides in plain sight, in quiet, in a simple gesture, or in the right advice at the right time. During that time of silence, God changed Tobias from a child to an adult, from obedience to release, from faith to a heritage. The young man who left with a sad heart and shaky feet came back with more than just money and good fortune. He came back different. He came back whole. He went back because he knew that faith is not being afraid, but choosing to trust even when things are dark. His comeback was as a son, a husband, an intercessor, and a live proof that God still sends help, even when it seems like everything is lost. Tobit was no longer blind, so he spent his days telling others about what God had done. There was honor in every sentence. A lot of praise was in every memory. He was sure that no doctor could help him see again. Without trust, he knew that he could not find the truth. He knew that the seeds for this healing had been set a long time ago, when his son was still wrestling with a fish in the Tigris. At the time, he didn't know why those strange orders were being given. Anna, on the other hand, stopped crying by the road. Now she smiled calmly as she watched her son walk with knowledge, her daughter-in-law's happiness in her home, and God's presence at every meal they shared. The house had gone from being quiet and suffocating to a place where people could speak out. There were neighbors, family members, and tourists there to hear how the Lord had answered the prayers of that family. Every day was better for Sara. The shame that was in her eyes was gone. She was now a sign of freedom. She used to cry behind closed doors, but now she sings without fear. She remade her identity with Tobias's help, and her pain turned into power. She was sure that the evil spirit that had been bothering her would not come back. She knew that her marriage was not like other marriages, because it was the product of a battle that could not be seen. Tobias, who stayed quiet and strong, set an example for his people, not because he was important or famous, but because he was calm. People felt safe around him because of the way he behaved. Even though he didn't say much, every word he did say came from a proven confidence. He knew what it was like to be scared. It was easy for him to understand how it felt to walk. It was easy for him to follow when nothing seemed important, so his power didn't come from being old, but from his dedication. He began to teach his kids how to see signs that the naked eye can't always see. They learned about a guy named Azariah who led them through dangerous areas, helped him deal with a wild fish, told them about an unusual marriage, and taught them to treat animal parts like holy instruments. He then told everyone something very few knew. That man was an angel, and the kids' eyes got really big with interest. But Tobias made sure they knew that the wonder wasn't just the angel, but also the God who sent him. "Do not worship the instruments," he said over and over again. "Thank the one who records history." The years went by without a problem. The house got bigger. People of new generations were born there. Tobias and Sara remembered that time when everything seemed unsure, but changed at every meal and party. Tobit had a peaceful life. He watched his kids and grandkids grow up. He died at a very old age, surrounded by his children and listening to their praise. His heart was at peace. It was also peaceful for Sara to leave, leaving a path for other women who had lost hope to find therapy. For a long time, Tobias stayed in the land where he had settled. He was fair in how he ran his home. It was important to him that people helped those in need, buried the dead with respect, prayed honestly, and gave their all to serving the Lord. He was a rock for his people, and even though he didn't shout, his life spoke loudly. Tobias's story isn't about things he did that people could see. It's about what happens when someone chooses to follow God, even though they can't be sure of what will happen. It's about having faith when things look bad. God's help doesn't always come in the form of flashes of light. Sometimes it comes in the form of a stranger on the road. Simple following was the start of everything Tobias went through. He said yes right away. He left home just now. He only put his trust in the person who was with him. God took care of the rest. Great miracles happen when people take small steps of faith, and there was no fame when it was all over. There were no castles. No one was yelling his name in a crowd. There was only a house full of light, a family marked by healing, and a man who had touched the eternal but didn't know it. It's because the unseen is always greater than the seen in God's stories. And the names of those who trust, even if they don't understand, are written not on stones, but in God's heart. Don't keep this story to yourself if it moved you. Tell someone who is waiting for God to answer them about it. It might be just what they need to hear. Write, "I trust in the path that God has laid out for me," in the comments and click like to get more people to see this video. What you said could be the first step toward a miracle. Sign up for our channel if you haven't already, and join our church group. Again, we are going to look for the promises that are hidden in the Bible's darkest pages. Thank you for following us to the end of this incredible story. See you in the next video. May God be with you always. Amen.